Alright, yo, so we're doing emoplugg today, so I thought I'd break down this beat to show you guys how simple these beats are, even though they sound kind of complicated. And the key to these beats really is bouncy drums with some memorable and catchy melodies. So to get that bounce, I always recommend staying around that 140 BPM area, though anywhere from like 125 to 150 really is fine. And always start with the piano in these beats. A guitar could work also, but we're going for an instrument that sounds real and authentic, something that can actually create that nostalgic feel. So the piano is what I go for first, and the key here, guys, is making sure that you have some emotional chords with a nice catchy melody on top. And this looks kind of complicated, but it doesn't have to be. It can be way simpler than this if you guys really want. And then lastly, what I always do with piano is you want to make it sound realistic. So the first thing I do is Alt S to strum the chords. And the last thing I do is go Alt R to pull up the randomizer, and I randomize the velocities too. And then for the mixing on this, it's pretty simple. It's just delay and then reverb, and then a simple compression and an EQ to cut the lows for the bass to come in, and cut the highs to make the melody sound a bit more mellow and to allow the leads that we're going to be adding in later to shine through. In terms of what this is addictive keys, and it's the arena ballad preset. Though any piano VST that has something that's mellow and soft would work perfectly for this. So after I go for the piano, I always move on to something that sort of drives the rhythm in the beat. And this can be something like an arp or a bell or even some staccato string plucks, like what I'm using here from Expand. And that sounds like this. And once again, this is a super simple melody. All I'm doing is following the notes that I highlighted earlier in the chord progression. And in terms of the mixing here, it's just a simple EQ and just a bit of a reverb. After I add some sort of a rhythm in, I always go for that legato string. And for this one, I'm using the soft legato strings, and it sounds like this. And once again, for all these melodies, all I'm doing is looking at the piano, and then I'm just picking notes that I like the sound of. And for the mix here, you guys might have guessed already, but it's just an EQ, and then a delay, and then a reverb. It's always the same. For this beat specifically, I threw in a second string. So for this, I brought in an actual violin. This is also from Expand. That just plays this super simple melody. And in terms of the mixing here, once again, EQ, reverb. And lastly, the best part, and arguably the hardest part to come up with, is the leads. But this is typically the most memorable part of your beat, and the part that I recommend you guys spend the longest time on. Purity is the absolute goat for all this stuff, and this sounds like this. And the key here, and what I always do for my leads, is call and response. This part right here is the call, and then here's the response. It's super simple, it doesn't have to be all over the place. Just come up with something in your head, or spam notes until you find something you like that goes along with the beat. And for the mix, it's a delay, then a reverb, and then some EQ. And then the second lead, and this one's from a Serum bank. That's from the Night Tiger Timeless bank, I believe, and this is the Sign 1 clean. Only difference is I did put on the filter here. Once again, it's not that complicated. It's literally just like 4 notes, and a lot of this is really just variation. I took this original motif and I copied it over here, but then just moved some of the notes around. And for this one, what do you guess is on it again? Delay, reverb, EQ, and some compression. So now that we have every melody that we just did, I route everything to a basic bus that just has a soft clipper on it, and this is really just to control the volume of everything. So here is all of our melodies together that we just did. Alright guys, so we're done with our melodies, so let's quickly talk about the drums. And in my opinion, this is the easiest part, because you really want to keep them simple but just create some bounce. And that all starts with the clap on the 2 and the 4. And then we just bring in a super simple counter snare. And then a hi-hat. Super simple 2-step, just add in some rolls, make it interesting, but keep it basic. And then after that, just throw in some different sound effects and some different pieces of percussion. I like to use things like rims, open hats, and then just random sound effects that you can find in any different drum kit. And then here's what all those different effects sound like together. Which sounds kind of weird by itself, but together with all the other percussion, it sounds like this. And then lastly, for our drums, here's the 808. And with my 808s, I always like to keep them more on the simple side, but I throw in some occasional rolls or some slides or even some chopped up ones here and there to create some variation in them. And then all the drums together now sound like this. And in terms of the mixing on here, all of it's pretty simple. It's just basic EQs on everything to remove any frequencies I don't like and take out anything that might mud up with another instrument or with another sound. And then occasionally there's a reverb or even an overdrive put on the 808. And then it's all finally put to a drum bus with a soft clipper on it to just control the level of everything. And now that we've got our drums out of the way, all we have left really is just some transition effects or some ambience that's in the background. So the first thing that I brought in is this reverse open hat, which you could kind of count as a drum, but I'm using it more as a transition effect. It's pretty unnoticeable. It just is for the feeling, and it brings a transition into when the 808 hits. And then in terms of the risers and stuff, there is 3 risers. There's 2 that play together in the intro. And then there is a 3rd one that comes in towards the end. And that's really it for the risers. The only other thing that I did do is I took this riser and I threw it in a little bit later when the 808 drops back in. Since the 808 is a little bit harsh in this and it's kind of loud and distorted, I wanted to introduce it with a sound to make it a bit softer to the ear. And finally, the only other things that is here is this nature bird sound effect that plays throughout the entire beat. And for all the risers in the ambience, there literally isn't any effects put on it. The only thing I did is switch the volume to make sure that everything blends together without being too harsh. And the very final two things is the master volume, which I fade out in the end for the outro, and a fruity love filter that comes in the beginning to give like that underwater effect, and that sounds like this. And then it opens up towards the end. And in terms of the master, I take the two melody and the drum bus, I route them to the master, and then I just put on a final fruity soft clipper. I think this is the third or fourth one we put on to control the volume, make sure nothing's peaking. And finally, I put an EQ on to boost the lows and the highs and very slightly in the mids. And that's basically it. It's not that difficult to mix these types of beats. They're really simple. All you guys need to prioritize is some reverb, some delay, and some smart EQing here and there to put things into their own pocket and keep them separated. So I hope this video was informative to you guys. I hope you guys learned something. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comment section below. If you guys like this beat, it's on my YouTube channel, and I'll throw it in the description as well. And without further ado, here's the beat. I'm out. Deuces.